So turbocharge your year. Seatbelt board. Take off to bumper harvests. Welcome to the seed capital of the world promotion, where you could win over 4,300 spot prizes, including our grand draw, where you could resort away to Victoria Falls, Elephant Hills, or Kariba, Caribbean Bay, Troutbeck and Yanga. You've earned your rewards. Remember, we've got prizes from bicycles to t-shirts. The more you buy, the more you could fly. 10 kgs is an automatic entry for our scratch cards. Drop it off into our drop boxes nationwide and you could drop into instant prizes. So turbocharge your year and take off to any Seedville outlet.
Isukile isiya kusivuno esikhulu. Siyalamukela ku-promotion ye-Seed Capital yezolimo. Lapho elikwanisa ukuthola imivuzo edlula 4,000 ehlanganisela ukuyabona indawo ezinhle zelizwe. Sesifikile isikhathi sokuvuna okusebenzekile. Khumbula, sinemivuzo eminingi. Thenga okuningi. Ungathenga inhlanyelo ye-10 kg, sungeni uyahle uphiwe i-scratch card. Ungasaleli, hamba uyethenga.
Forest Commission nemabazi akasiyana kumele abantu private sector zvakare iri pano reference of development pamapartners avo vanasito vananyaradzwe vava vakasiyana-siyana nozvikurudzirwa nehurumende hanza kuti maPPP zvatika public private partnership zvatika kureva kuti mune mari chekuita panyaya dzese dzekuchengetedza masango sakakambokumbira mose kuti ngatirave takabatana tichichengetedza masango nekudyara miti yatiri kutaura nezvayo pano.
After the inaugural walkathon in 2010, we realized that to plant any number of trees embarked on an aggressive nursery establishment exercise countrywide by participating partners such as that which we have witnessed today. I'm excited about the establishment of Chipangura Nursery, spearheaded by our good partners, Seed Company of Zimbabwe. There is a differentiation in the sense that Seedco has also established a demo plot showcasing their varieties, and it is my hope, based on discussions that we've held, that as Forte, this partnership can extend to other nurseries together with the likes of our other valued partners, Sable Chemicals, as we have to continue regreening this country.
Seedco, takaona zvakakodzera kuti kuguru vese vapedza kutema miti vachi.
Welcome to our analyst presentation. Yesterday we had a presentation to the Association of Botswana's International Presentation of Security, about 80% of security international. So we always start by publishing security international. Those results are consolidated into security in the 30% ownership in that business. Now in terms of the security business, it's starting a little bit with the economy. Elections will come and go, but I think there's still some significant policy uncertainty. We know the budget was published recently, but there are quite a number of issues that still need to be clarified. I think there's a lot of anxiety that's coming out of the budget. Our understanding is that we have been in typos and errors and so on. So knowing that someone will facilitate the discussion this morning is sitting in the room.
power shortages, the government programs are continuing. So the programs in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, in Malawi, in Tanzania, to a certain extent, they are continuing. The other challenge that we've noticed in this region where we are operating is the issue of currencies. I think you would all have read about the Malawi devaluation a couple of weeks ago, 44%. The kwacha has moved from around 16 to 23. The Kenyan shilling from about 120 to around 150 now. And it's a bit of a bloodbath on the exchange rate front. So in Zimbabwe, of course, we know what's been happening with exchange rates, particularly over the last few weeks with the movement in the alternative currency rates. Just talking about the business, if you can move to the next screen here. We continue doing what we do best in terms of research. So we continue releasing new varieties. In Zimbabwe, we did release 2 new soybean varieties, and we also released 3 bean varieties. And there are some sunflower hybrids that we are trialing, which are showing a lot of promise. In terms of the region, again, we did release 2 varieties in Kenya, SC739 and SC805. We are particularly excited about SC805 because it's meant to address the Kenyan highlands, and 60% of the maize seed market in Kenya is in the highlands. Up to now, we didn't have a variety to play with in that segment, so this variety is going to be our first entrant, and it does give us an opportunity to compete with other seed houses in Kenya in terms of this bigger market in that country. In Zambia, the biggest problem that the farmers there face is crop rots, and we've come up with 2 new varieties, SC669 and SC671, to address these crop rot issues. In South Africa, we've released 3 varieties which have come tops in terms of silage trial evaluations. So this is maize that's basically grown to be used as silage. It's chopped up before it starts drying. It's really more for its biomass and feeding animals. In Nigeria, we've got 5 hybrids that are undergoing on-farm evaluation, and our breeders have also made some significant progress in terms of coming up with varieties that are full armyworm tolerant. On the production side, last year we had a very good production season in Zimbabwe. We had started wanting to produce about 18,000 tons. That was our target. We actually ended up getting about 25,000 metric tons. So our production figures were very, very good. The yields that came out of the fields were very, very good. We currently have about 32,000 metric tons for the Zimbabwean market. This is seed that's currently available. Our budget is around 16,000 metric tons for this market. And for us, it's an important figure because what it basically means is we are more or less carrying twice the seed that we expect to sell in this market. And that does put us in a good position in terms of the forecast drought. If our production does get affected this year, we will be having adequate stocks for next year. And that should be a good thing in terms of early supply to customers and so on. Globally, in terms of the group, we've got about 60,000 metric tons. We're expecting to sell about 48,000 metric tons. So again, we should be having a good carryover to address the customer requirements at the beginning of the next selling season. While the overall stocks are adequate, we do have gaps though for some of the popular varieties. Our key variety is SC719, which is a highly migratory variety. It's demanded in almost all countries where we do business. And we are already receiving reports that despite the drought, in most markets, it has actually already run out. So even though we've got adequate quantities, varieties sometimes are a bit of a challenge, having the correct varieties. And SC719, because of its producibility, sometimes it's a challenge to have adequate stocks. On the processing side, you will all recall we We did commission our dryer here in Zimbabwe last year, but one. This year, the dryer was able to process its fully commissioned capacity of 5,000 metric tons. That was the target that we had in terms of the seed that we want to be sending early to the market. All our other processing plants in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, Malawi, and Tanzania are working up very, very well. What we are having to do is invest in backup power facilities because of the challenges that we are seeing in the region. So we are doing a lot of solar investments. You'd have seen a bit of solar work that we've done, for example, in the car park there to augment some of our power needs here. We also did break ground in terms of a new factory in Kisongo, just outside Arusha in Tanzania, to address the demands of the growing Tanzanian market. It's a market that has been growing double digit every year, and we have to increase the capacity in terms of processing. We also are looking at increasing drying capacity in the other markets, particularly Zambia, because we tend to use it for producing for our export markets, and the seed needs to hit the factory early. I think in terms of operations review, that's where I will stop for now and ask John to come and talk a little bit on the figures. John.
Thank you. I will move straight to the performance for the half year. I will talk through the salient features of the income statement, the balance sheet, and I'll also talk about briefly about the performance of the major associate, that is Sitco International. So going straight on to the performance for the half year, which, as most of you all know, it's largely sale of winter cereals. The performance for the half year doubled in terms of revenue from 30 billion to almost 60 billion. That's in inflation-adjusted terms. On the historical cost, you will see the revenue increasing from 6 billion to 42 billion. It's largely as a result of value tracking, where the pricing were to follow inflation. Then looking at the other significant item on the income statement there, other income, it's largely exchange gains for sales that we do in US dollars and then converted into ZWL at the closing rate, which increased as compared to the prior year. And then looking at the operating expenses, they are a reflection of the inflation, increasing from 16.29 billion to 38. In historical terms, you will see the numbers jumped from 4 billion to almost 35 billion. Then we've got finance costs, that's the other significant item there. You will notice that the finance cost came down. I will talk a bit more on that. Current half year, almost 10 billion compared with the same period prior year of 14. And then the net monetary loss because of the inflation increasing from 29 to 100, giving an overall profit for the period 9.1 versus 87 billion versus prior year of 9. If they can make sense to you, these billions. Next. Just talking a bit more about revenue, like I said, if you look at the complexion or the makeup of our revenue, it's largely the winter cereals, where the volumes increased by 6%, from 5,600 metric tons last year to 6,000 metric tons this year. For maize, there was a slow start to the season. As at half year, we had only moved 1,600 and 38 metric tons versus prior year of 2,000 metric tons. If I can move on. So just looking at the gross margin, you will see from those numbers that the gross margin improved by 4% in historical terms, from 54% to 58%. This is largely a result of price reviews that we have had to track the value. Like I said, operating expenses increasing by 135% in inflation-adjusted terms because of spiraling inflation. Finance costs, they came down. You recall last year, same period, we're borrowing at around 130, 120, thereabout. But this half year, the average on the ZWL borrowings were around 95%. So that's why the interest cost came down. Then on the associate, share of associate, there's positive contribution from Citco International, as well as Qton. They posted higher profit, driven largely by exchange gains. Prime Citco recorded improved performance owing to higher margins. We've had to improve the pricing as well because most of the product is imported. Just going on to the balance sheet, how does it look like as at half year? Just looking at the trade receivables, they are a reflection of what we sold, particularly the winter cereals, and also a bit of what was outstanding. 34 billion, we had secured almost 90% of the production. We had almost paid all of it. Very little is left. And then on the other side of the balance sheet, looking at the borrowings, they increased from 79 billion prior year to 133. And then, trade and other payables is really other creditors that do with the supplies for processing. And then just looking at the PPE, we haven't revalued our assets as at half year. We normally do that at the end of the year. If I can move on. And then just looking at the international, for those that listened to the presentation yesterday, looking at the revenue, it increased from 25.5 million to 31 million. Improved performance on almost all our business units in international. Operating expenses, they were kept under control, increasing marginally from 15 million to 15.3. Because of the improved margins, our operating profit increased by almost $4 million from a loss of 2.6 last year to a profit of 1.3 this year. The finance costs increased from 1.4 to 3.4 million this year. What we had to do because of increasing devaluation of the local currencies in our markets against the US dollar, we've had to restructure our borrowings so that we can avoid exchange losses or reduce exchange losses. So we skewed our borrowings into local borrowings in the various markets where the interest rate is slightly higher. If we didn't do that, we would have a much bigger exchange loss, because like what Morgan said in his opening presentation, all the currencies against the US dollar, they've been falling, and we don't foresee that reducing. It's probably going to get worse. So we've had to change from USD borrowings, which are at a lower interest rate, to local in-country borrowings at a higher interest rate. So on the overall profit reduced it increased, the loss rather reduced from 4.5 million to 3.5. But in terms of operating profit, the business performed very well. Just looking at the turnover, why it increased from 25.5 million to 31 million this year. The major reason is because of the price adjustments and also the volume growth. price adjustments accounted for 6.7 million, while volume growth accounted for 2.1. The devaluation or the depreciation of the currencies accounted for a negative 3.1 million on the turnover there. So just reiterating a bit on the income statement, margins improving from 44% to 48%. Operating expenses, marginal increase, 2%. However, on the JVs and associate, the loss increased from almost 500,000 to 1.5, almost 1.5 million, because of an impairment of the goodwill on acquisition of our JV in South Africa. We have had to take a knock on the impairment of the goodwill when we acquired that JV. Looking at the balance sheet for the associate, slight decrease on the balance sheet from 157 million to 156. If you look at the inventories, increasing from 33 to 44, receivables decreasing because of collections, and then on the borrowings, they increased from 46 to 54, mainly to fund the production of the stocks that we have had to get. Then looking at, I will talk about Zimbabwe briefly on the performance of the local unit. Maize, very pleasing, and then on the maize, it's a slow start of the programs, and I'm sure you will see from the heat that we're experiencing, farmers might be a bit jittery, but we hope things will come around. Zambia, impressive performance during the first half, turnover increasing by 28% to 21.6 million. Overheads were controlled at 6% below prior year, and the half-year profit was 4.7 million versus 2.7 last year. Price reviews, better margins resulted in that improved performance. Finance costs, like I indicated, were higher than prior year in Zambia, 1.4 million versus prior year of 700,000 because of skewing of our borrowings toward the local borrowings instead of USD borrowings. Tanzania, the turnover grew by 56% on the back of volume growth as well, and price reviews, better margins. So margins improving from 39% prior year to 49, almost 50%, driven largely by very impressive performance on the varieties like SC719, which is in short supply as we speak. So better performance, we hope the trajectory will improve in East Africa there. Malawi, improved performance as well, 6.4 million turnover increasing by 123%. Open market and export volume growth, price reviews and higher margins resulted in the overall profit moving from a negative territory last year to a positive performance this year. Kenya, again, Kenya also improved performance, volumes doubling, turnover at 4.9, favorable weather conditions, attractive grain prices, and price reviews improved the performance of that unit. Mozambique, it's a growing market. The performance is impressive at the moment, although largely driven by the NGO business. Turnover improving, 2.1 million turnover, significant jump from hardly 100,000 in the prior year. So the business posted a profit compared to a loss in the previous year. Botswana, very little activity at the moment. The outlook.
All right, so it remains uncertain. I don't need to be telling you about the Zim environment. We all know what's currently happening. For us, I think the biggest issue is the El Nino situation that we are facing. Up to now, when you look at the sales volumes, we've probably done about 50% of budget. And as you know, our sales, the biggest catalyst is usually the coming of the rains. Most farmers wait to buy until they get the first few drops of rain. So there's quite a bit of anxiety in terms of farmers buying. In the early months, seed was moving, but now we see a bit of stickiness, everyone waiting to see if there are going to be rains in the next few weeks or so. Generally, we've been having rains coming late every year due to this climate change, but the forecast of the drought does make things very, very uncertain. We have tried as much as possible to protect shareholder value by opening up shops where we are selling directly instead of going through the traditional retail network, and also enabling us to access direct US dollar sales, because the traditional network was always passing on RTGS to us. And we have seen some very good traction in those shops until recently because of this worsening drought situation. Our change to invoicing in US dollars has helped us to cushion the business in terms of exchange losses. So you will see in those figures that John presented, there was a big figure which was to do with exchange gains because of in terms of the weather. Is more predictable than the exchange rate movements you can have done. In terms of outlook,
we still expect, like I said, we moved them to local borrowings that are slightly higher.
Yeah, you're recording in Sitco Limited.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
In terms of the margins, because what you are paying the grower is slightly. All right, if there are no questions, we've got some eats and drinks by